Welcome to this week's episode of Kink Candid. Shay here with Jay. We got an interesting topic for tonight. We have been putting up some of our soapbox episodes that are shorter but topical, and they're up on the YouTube channel and all that as well. But this is our newest full episode. And tonight we are coming to talk to you about the misconceptions that surround 24/7 TPE style arrangement. I asked about this in a group that I'm in over on Reddit and got some very interesting responses, most of which I have personally witnessed and seen and encountered myself. So I was thinking we'd go through these points. I'm not going to mention anybody by name, out of respect for everybody else's privacy, but we'll go through the points that were raised and let your friendly neighborhood dominant and submissive representative of this community explain why that's not how it works for us. And you'll have seen a lot of these too, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
Our first one the very first response I got was the misconception that the opinions or desires of the S-type don't matter. Yeah.
Wow. Just wow.
Yeah, that was pretty much my response, honestly. I've encountered that a lot. People seem to have this idea.
I'm not even sure I can begin to explain to you just how very wrong that is.
We say here at my house that my opinions, desires, etc., absolutely do matter, and I am always encouraged to express them on any given topic. And on some topics, on some topics he will weight my opinion more heavily simply because we have different skill sets, and there are some topics that I am actually more knowledgeable on than he is.
Right. When it comes to educating the children, for instance.
Right, exactly.
Or handling the household budget.
Right, that one is mine. And so while he always has the right to make the final say, my opinions always come into play. And I know you and your wife well enough to know that hers do too.
Oh yeah.
And
I don't usually make a move without consulting her first.
Yeah, and that's generally how it is here. We don't. There's not a lot of unilateral decision making going on here. So that one just sort of boggled me the minute I saw it. I was like, yeah, I know people think that, but no.
And and for the record, on the few times that I have jumped ahead without discussing things with her, unilaterally, I have come to regret it.
It doesn't usually end well, frankly. So
not because she makes my life difficult if I don't speak with her, which would be a natural assumption, but because I am so often very wrong when I don't stop to consult the other half of my soul, so to speak.
We have a running joke at here that the phrase that we use a lot is we joke about it as "have you considered?" And you can just say those three words and get both of us to crack up at my house, because that is my way of gently suggesting that there is a
crowbar
or a thought process that maybe had not occurred to him.
Yes.
It's a nice way of saying, I don't think you have really thought this through. And you just go, have you considered this? and it's absolutely meant as a respectful way to sort of say, okay, but I think you might want to take this into account, because I don't think you have, this has occurred to you. And so that was immediately followed by another person in the group saying that sometimes she wished her master would not consider her opinion quite so much, as it would make the daily "what should we have for dinner" back and forth so much easier. So
well, yeah, but it's conversations like that that sort of make a household, really.
It was also the same original poster of that one also pointed out that she's encountered a lot of that the S-types cannot have hobbies or friends or relationships with families. And this seems weird to me, especially because, again,
we just keep digging deeper, don't we?
Yeah, I was like, wait, huh? People actually think that? Of course I have hobbies. Hello, I'm doing the show.
Yeah, and he encourages you to do so without his interference.
Right. He absolutely encourages me because, you know, he wants me to have interest and thoughts. And I absolutely have friends, and I talk to my family on a regular basis. I FaceTime with my little sister. I talk to my dad. These are things that, because we're, you know, human beings.
I'm here to tell you that my mother-in-law lives an hour and a half away from my house. If my wife did not remain in contact, my mother-in-law would not be an hour and a half away from my house. My mother-in-law would be at the front door banging on it with a sledgehammer. Denying your submissive a relationship with their family isn't dominance. It's abuse.
Yes.
I don't often come straight out and say it that way, especially to our audience, but I don't see any other way of construing that.
No, the only
one of the first things an abuser will do, I'm sorry, but this I feel this is important because we brought it up. One of the first things an abuser will do is begin to isolate the target. They'll start to cut you off from your friends, either by starting arguments with them and driving them away that way, or simply suggesting that the people that you care about and the people that care about you, friends, family, and otherwise, simply aren't good for you. They're not good influences. And
that's where it gets dangerous.
I'm sorry?
And I think that's where it gets dangerous because my thought process was the only way that it would ever be acceptable to discourage the relationship between your submissive and their family is in cases where the family is actively toxic or dangerous. But that is always the claim of abusers too, so it gets to be a really dicey, weird area. Because they will claim that even when it's not true. And it may be
that your submissive or your dominant, for that matter, has gotten themselves connected with someone who isn't healthy for them, who is toxic, as we say. And one relationship may be that way, but every relationship you have, that's unlikely. So when they start trying to cut you off from every connection you have, every friend, every member of your family, you need to take a step back and start looking for the door, to be honest.
Oh, and that's a really good point because he has, on occasion, it stated that there are certain individuals that I am not allowed to be in any kind of real contact with because these people have proven to be dangerous. But the key difference is that these are few and far between. And so it's because there was a legitimate basis for it rather than I simply don't want you talking to anyone.
Right.
I am allowed to have male friends, for example.
Yeah, me.
You come to mind. If a male friend oversteps and begins to disrespect our marriage, then he will at that point step in and say no. But it's not because I'm not allowed to have friends or I'm not allowed to have male friends or what have you. It's because this particular person is a problem. And that's, I think, a really good point. It's a key difference there. This next point you'll be really well prepared to speak on, I'm sure.
Okay.
The concept, the next poster came in and said that the concept was that 24/7 couples never step out of role, which I frankly disagree with because I think when we say people are stepping out of role, it's because we misunderstand what the role is, but that's another topic.
Yeah.
But
and it's one we've spoken on in the past.
Yeah, they then
and probably will again.
probably will again, yeah. They then clarified that what they were referring to is the idea that you are always turned up to 11, and that that it's always high protocol and all of that kind of thing. And they state in there that, you know, the 24/7 dynamic is still there, but it's not as on as it's perceived by some. And I think that opens up a door that is a point that I've tried really hard to clarify whenever I'm asked about it. No, we're not always high protocol. We're not always on in that.
May I?
Go for it.
The easiest way I can put it to you is this isn't a Hollywood movie set. We're not working from a script, and we're not working to an audience. There may be relationships that do work to an audience on occasion, but that's not us. And quite honestly, when you talk about high protocol, yeah, I there are nights when I get in the mood for that type of interaction, but on a general day-to-day basis, I don't have the patience or the time for it. I want to be able to look at my girl and go, I need X, and trust that X, Y, or Z, or whatever it is I've asked for, will be delivered when I need it, how I need it, and in a respectful manner without all the bowing and scraping and ceremony. I enjoy it. It's part of what drew me into the lifestyle. I enjoy the protocol, but I'm not a kid anymore, and there are things that take precedence.
You know, that the coffee comes to mind there.
Yes.
Could I make a big ceremony out of bringing him a cup of coffee? I absolutely can.
And have.
And probably will again, if the mood strikes that's what he's looking for at that moment. But 9 times out of 10, it's, can you give me a cup of coffee? And I go and I make the coffee and I bring the coffee to him and I hand him the coffee and I go, here you go. Here's your coffee. Yeah. This is as far as that's it.
In my experience, on the nights or instances, I should say, not necessarily nights because it's not always, but on the instances when my girl slips into what we're coming to refer to as high protocol without having been encouraged to do so, it's her way of silently asking for attention. It's her way of asking me to take the leash and take her into a room and shut the door.
It is,
and that's as far down that road as I'm going to take it, because I know we try and keep the show safe for work in most cases.
Generally speaking, yes, that is something I've tried to do. So then, for example, the next point, and this is all the same person, she raised several points that were quite good.
Yeah.
They did, I should say. I think this person is female, but I really don't know. So we'll go
right, and you've listened to my last soapbox.
Yeah, I default to they if I'm not sure. So if I refer to someone in the episode as they, it's because I'm not sure what pronouns they use. So
that's fair.
They point out that this is the big one. We've talked about it. I won't go deep into it on this episode because we've talked about it before, but it is a common misconception that we are inherently in abusive relationships because it's 24/7, because it's TPE. And that simply just isn't true. No matter, it just isn't. This dynamic does not inherently mean abusive. It doesn't. That's just all there is to it. They point out that the way that you do 24/7 with one person will work with another partner, or if you don't do it this way, you're doing it wrong. And with very, 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 very few exceptions, I agree. There's really not a wrong way to do it in most cases.
Right. My way isn't your way isn't my way, and neither of our ways is going to work for the couple down the street.
And, there are some hard and fast rules that would be wrong, but very few, honestly. It's pretty rare for something to be wrong. If, what is it? Let's see what else we had here. If X, then you must be into Y. If you are a 24/7 submissive, you must be into degradation, as an example, is the example that was given. I'll speak on that.
Please do. I know this argument. I've heard it before.
No, there just isn't, and that's simply not true. I know girls that are 24/7 that are very much into sort of degradation and that sort of thing. I am not. It's not a thing, and making those sorts of assumptions it speaks to the idea that they think that 24/7 means that we're some sort of weird Borg-like hive mind, and I promise we're not. I swear we are not a Borg-like hive mind that's submissive. Promise.
There are 4 lights.
Just because the last chick you knew was into being called degrading names in the bedroom does not necessarily mean the next one will. I, for one, am not a fan of that particular form of play. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good to me. And I've explained it to my husband here that, no, I don't like that. And which is fine because he doesn't really get off on it either or anything. But the reason for it for me is that for me, this is inherently about being pleasing and being good. Calling me degrading names does not make me feel good, and I don't want that. And so, if someone else is into being called degrading names, then by all means, that is your kink is not my kink, and that's okay. But yeah, please don't assume that any of us are into the same things as someone else you knew. Because,
no.
like I said, we're not a hive mind, and we're just not. Someone spoke to the idea that rules and protocols should not exist just for the sake of having them, per se.
No.
Rules are complicated. Rules have to be remembered by the submissive. They have to be enforced by the dominant, and there should probably be a reason behind it.
Okay. May I try and sum this up rather quickly?
Go for it.
If you don't know by now, you'll learn from listening to the show that I am a hard and fast truck fan. Always have been. And I think in this instance, Scotty said it best. The more they overtick the plumbing, the easier it is to stop up the drain. The more complicated you make it, the easier it is for it to go wrong.
This is very true.
The more rules there are, the more you've got to remember, and the more you've got to enforce. And in my relationship with my wife, rules exist for two reasons: safety and comfort. And that's it, really. I make a rule to keep her safe, to keep her out of that dangerous situation, and I make a rule to make sure that she's comfortable with what we're doing, and I'm comfortable with what we're doing. That's really all it breaks down to.
There really is. Now this person I happen to know is male. He points out, and this came from a dominant in this equation, stated that one of the biggest misconceptions he had encountered is that the S-type, which is I believe we've spoken on the show about the use of the term S-type, but because subs and slaves both exist in 24/7 situations, we tend to use S-type to sort of collectively refer to, S-types, subs, slaves, what have you.
Just as you use D-type to refer to dominance or daddies or
masters,
whatever flavor.
Right. And so D-type and S-type is the sort of generic term for that. It states that the common misconception of that the S-type is kept naked and in chains all the time. I have quite literally been asked that. How much of the time, how often does he keep you naked and in bondage? Like, I have a job and children. It's not a thing.
And I have to ask a question here. How comfortable do you have to be with somebody to ask that question?
I had literally barely spoken to this person, so that's the funky thing. I will periodically get messaged because of the show and because of my presence in certain subreddits and things of that nature. I will occasionally get asked, to give my perspective on the 24/7 sort of dynamic. And I'm very open about that. I'm perfectly willing to discuss that. But I get asked these sorts of questions. Well, how much of the time do you spend naked and in bondage? And I'm going, very, very little, actually. I have a job and children and a house to clean, and I have a life. I don't spend my days chained up and naked. That's just not a thing. It just isn't. Yeah. I don't know who thinks this. This is a life and a house and a family, not a porn movie. Okay?
Like I said, we're not in Hollywood. We're not on a set.
We live this, and so that means that no, I don't spend my days chained up or in a cage or something, because frankly, if I'm chained up or in a cage, I can't do the dishes and take care of the children, and that's really not going to work. So,
no. Besides, I've seen your house. It's not big enough for a cage.
It's really not.
No.
And okay, our next poster has several, so we'll work through these a little bit at a time. That everyone is always horny. That's a common misconception, especially for 24/7. I did I did a whole episode by myself about the fact that, especially for 24/7 people, it's really not about sex. So no, we are not always horny, because a good chunk of what we do really doesn't have anything to do with sex. Plus, we have bodies and illnesses and all that shit.
I'll illustrate, if I may. A couple days ago, going down the hallway. Now we've discussed already that I suffer from several disabilities. Going down the hallway in my house, for one reason or another, I reached for the grab rail where it should have been, and it wasn't there. And because I overbalanced myself, the walker tipped sideways, and I fell. I fell onto the walker. You can imagine this is not a comfortable situation. It took some doing to get me back up off the floor and onto my feet. And so for the last several days, I have been battered and bruised and just seriously not in the mood. Thank you very much. I am in the mood to take my pain pills, sleep, and have food. And occasionally read.
And, we have, and it's those things, situations like that, or, somebody's had a really tough week at work, which we dealt with this past week at my house. There was some crazy stuff going on at his job and mine. And by the time the day is over, we're both just like, I just want to veg. I'm just not tonight. I just need to zone and put on Netflix, and that's about it. And that happens because, it's life. I'm not trying to jump him every day, every minute of every day. Sorry, it's not happening. Which leads to her next point, that the S-type is always, always over the top obsessed every hour of every day. And that's simply not true. We have other things we're thinking about, and sometimes being his submissive means we're chilling in our recliners watching Netflix. So, that's I had girls' night with a friend of ours last weekend, and went out for a couple of hours to painting with a twist, and we painted pictures and had a blast. And he stayed home and played video games and talked. I believe he talked to his mom. But yeah, we can be apart from each other occasionally. So, I don't. That you can't be an S-type lady and a feminist at the same time, which is an entire soapbox rant all by itself. But suffice it to say, I absolutely can. Thank you very much.
I was going to ask, Shay, have you looked in the mirror today?
There we go. Yeah, I can absolutely be a feminist and an S-type at the same time. I promise. Feminism is about allowing everyone, male and female, to make choices about their life, and that includes the choice to be in this type of relationship. That's, it's a soapbox all by itself, but for now, we'll leave it at that. That 24/7 is just a thinly veiled attempt by religion to make gender roles look trendy. I won't even dignify that one with an answer because what we're doing here really has nothing to do with being trendy, like at all.
Or religious. You are. Well, I am not.
Right, exactly. It doesn't. The two are not inherently tied. It plays a role for me, but it does not for you. And so, yeah, that men are always the D type and women are always the S type. This one I see a lot.
People have been watching way too many movies.
Yeah. There are, I promise, 24/7 female-led relationships. I promise you they exist. I've met a few. They're really not any different than the male dominant female submissive types. What's represented here on the show tends to primarily lean towards male dominant female submissive, but that is just because that's what the kind of relationships we are in. Other configurations exist. Even switches can be 24/7. I think it's harder for switches, but they can. There's always going to be super obvious to outsiders. Yeah, this one, again, I get a lot. People assume that they would definitely know that because they have this idea, I think, that we're all running around in leather on a leash, chained up in a cage all the time. So of course it would be obvious to everyone because, hello, have you seen what we do? And I'm going, except that we don't really do any of that.
I'm going to speak up here again because this, and you'll remember this, Shay, because we were both there at the time. Shay and I had a relationship for a very long time in which she was part of my household. She was one of the S-types in my household. She lived day in and day out in her color. How many times did we get asked about it?
Oh my gosh.
I remember only once.
Yeah, I really only recall the one time. I don't recall getting asked about it. I don't get asked about my current one a lot either, actually.
We got called out on it once, and we got called out on it once because we were in a BDSM shop.
Right, yeah, where we would expect people to recognize it for what it was. But in the day-to-day life, no, it never really came up. I've been asked about my current one, about 3 times. Once was a very innocent sort of, I notice you always wear it. Why?
Yeah.
And I gave my sort of stock answer on. I have been asked a couple of times in public by people who recognize it for what it was. But it's rare. I've run into a couple of other submissives who clearly know what it meant. And, commented on it. But 99% of the time, people don't even notice it's there, honestly.
Hell, my parents came to visit and didn't recognize it. Didn't notice it.
Yeah. It never really, it doesn't come up as often as people think. It's much more subtle, I think, than people realize. Again, this is the porn movie thing, I think.
Yeah.
This woman also points out that she's been told that only porn star level of attractive people are into it, and also, oddly enough, the reverse. Either you're not pretty enough to be a submissive, or you're too pretty to be one, which are completely contradictory, and both make zero sense to me, honestly.
I can assure you, I am well and truly on the wrong side of 40, and in all of those years, no one from the porn industry has approached me and offered me a job. So that's not a thing.
I promise I am not porn star attractive. I'm just going to put that out there. My husband, my master, he tells me that he thinks I am very hot and beautiful and all of those things, and I think the same things about him, but I promise you that neither of us are actually porn stars, and the porn industry is not knocking down our door asking us to come do movies for them. It's not a thing. And I'm not really sure why someone would think there needs to be an attractiveness threshold for what we do, but there's not, I swear. These two kind of go hand in hand, that no one in a 24/7 situation has hard limits, and that the S-type, if a woman, will eventually leave for a guy who shows her real respect. I would point out that my other half absolutely respects me, so that's the first thing. So I don't need to go somewhere else to get real respect, because he absolutely respects me. That's the first thing, and I assure you that I do and will continue to have hard limits. And he has hard limits too. So I want to kind of point that out while we're talking about the topic of hard limits. I don't know that every dominant does, but everyone I've ever known, including you, have limits of their own. Because there are some things you guys just are like, nope, I'm not doing that. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, no.
And so, yeah, I promise we all have hard limits. And to finalize her post on it, no, I do not have a dungeon in my house.
We're back to, I've seen your house. It's too small.
Yeah, there's I don't have space for a dungeon.
And if there's somewhere in that house where you're hiding a dungeon, it's time to share.
When I figure it out, I'll be sure to let you guys know. But we are talking about buying a house, and we would like to have a room set aside to play in, but not a dungeon per se. Just a place where we could store toys and things outside of our actual bedroom. It's more of a space issue than anything else. We don't actually need a dungeon per se. Currently, my toys live in a trunk in the bedroom, but we'd like to have more space to store them in a separate location. But the dungeon is simply not necessary. This again goes back to the idea that it's about sex and that we're all living, this sort of odd porn movie life. And I promise we're not.
No.
We're really just like everybody else in most ways. Now, this next person is someone who is newer to 24/7, and I've actually had some conversations with personally. So I was very glad to see them weigh in on this. This one I want your perspective on too, especially because the first thing they pointed out was that doms never get to relax or take breaks, and that doms are better people or more impressive than the S-type.
What?
Yeah.
No. I promise you that without the women in my life, I would be a horrible person. That's just, no.
And I promise that I know I can speak for mine on this one. And I point out, as you we've pointed out a couple times on the show, I know him and his wife very, very well at this point. And I assure you that both my co-host here and my husband absolutely get time to relax and take breaks.
Oh, yeah. What do you think this is?
Yeah, they have their downtime. He sat and played his favorite video game for a couple of hours tonight because it's Sunday and it's time to relax, and that's what he wanted to do to relax. And so, yeah, that's the thing. Now, this one, they point out, was actually the most destructive misconception that they personally had. And I thought that was a very interesting point because I see this come up a lot. I've actually had long conversations with people online about this particular point, that you have to step out of your role to have a real conversation.
No.
And they point out that they've learned to speak from the bottom, to negotiate and give information. And this I will not directly quote, but come close to. They say if they were able to easily step back out of the role and not be submissive for that time, then they're not sure they could consider themselves his submissive in the first place. And I wholeheartedly agree.
Yeah.
If it were easy for me to just be like, oh, I'm not submissive for this moment, for this conversation, then that affects my ability to even call myself a submissive to begin with. And for me, and I keep seeing people, and I've pointed it out every time I see it online. I point it out. They tell people that they need to step out of their role, have an out of dynamic conversation, and that if the dominant won't allow them to have the out of dynamic or out of role conversation, then that's a huge red flag, and it means they're abusive and this, that, and the other. And I was going, well, not necessarily.
I want to know how much fabric these people are using on all these red flags, because you'd think there'd be no red fabric left in Joann's or Hobby Lobby.
There's no red fabric anywhere apparently, because it's all been used to make red flags. And I'm going to understand that it doesn't make it abusive that we don't have an out of dynamic. I finally told somebody today, I was like, there is no out of dynamic. That doesn't exist for us. Now, if what you're saying is it's a concerning statement that if a dominant won't allow you to express your thoughts and feelings or concerns, then you are absolutely correct. They should be allowing you to express to them, I have concerns, I have a problem, what have you, but it doesn't have to be out of role.
Certainly.
Mine would be angry if I didn't, honestly, because he can't do his job if he doesn't have all the information. So I have to tell him where I'm at.
When my wife and I first started, when we first got together, it was I was so new to the situation and so new to the scene, so to speak, that I was stopping every few minutes to ask, are you okay? Is this okay? So she finally had to sit me down and go, look, if it's not okay, believe me, I'll tell you. I will let you know. We have a safe word just for that reason.
Yep.
You're not going to break me. I'm fine.
Another person pointed that out too, that it's unhealthy if you don't step outside your dynamic to discuss important issues. No.
No. We are perfectly capable of discussing important issues, from our own personal needs and health and things, to issues that deal with the children, to issues that deal with politics, without stepping outside our respective roles. This is where we belong.
And so you'll like this one. That doms are distant, emotionless cornballs that are completely sure of themselves and narcissistically infallible.
I'm sorry, were you listening just a minute ago? How sure of myself did I sound?
I don't know where that comes from. Honestly, I really don't. First of all, I know Jay here and my master well enough to know that neither of them are emotionless, first of all. And if your dominant is emotionless and distant, you should probably be questioning why that is. That does not seem like a good basis to work from.
Mind you, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a medical professional in any way. But my first reaction to that would be, that's not a dom, it's a sociopath. Back away.
It would raise serious eyebrows for me.
Yeah,
There should be, a connection and a closeness, not distance. There should be emotions, not emotionless. Those are abnormal in human beings, and certainly in this type of relationship. No, he is not a hornball. He is not always focused on sex. That's not a thing.
If he were, he couldn't do his job.
And no, he is absolutely not completely sure of himself at all times. None of us are. We're human beings. I'm not completely sure of myself as a submissive, and I know he's not 100% sure of himself as a dominant all the time either.
No.
And no, he is not infallible or narcissistic about it. Again, if your dom is narcissistic, that is concerning. I don't know why anyone got the idea that was something that should be happening.
I'm assured from several people that that's a quality that some women seek, that some S types seek in their dominance, but I can't for the life of me understand why.
I can accept and believe that it is a thing that some S types seek out. I won't speak on it any further on that, honestly, because I simply don't understand it. To me, that is not a positive quality in a dominant. To me, I don't want narcissistic tendencies in my dom. That's not. I don't think that would be healthy for me. The safe word issue comes up a lot with 24/7. Either that we don't have safe words, I promise you we do. Or that it's inherently bad or evil or wrong for 24/7 couples who either use plain language rather than having a traditional safe word, or more commonly, the 24/7 S-type who has simply forgotten what the safe word is because it doesn't come up.
Yeah.
Our subreddit founder points out that she doesn't tell people that she doesn't remember the safe word and she doesn't say that in most places because it freaks people out, but she's like, we've never actually used it. He knows better than I do when I'm at that point. But you say that in most circles that are not 24/7 and people start screaming at you that, safe words are non-negotiable, et cetera, et cetera. And yes, I think any dom that wanted you to start a 24/7 relationship with no safe word in place, that is a concern. But not having, I've had it pointed out to me that one of the marks, I had a dominant say this in a group I'm in the other day, that they considered it a quote-unquote red flag for when people were asking how you could gauge the experience level of a new person that you were talking to, dominant or submissive. And what was asked, they said the questions that you should be asking are, with a dominant, when is the last time that someone got hurt when you were playing? Because any dominant who says that has never happened is probably either lying or inexperienced, simply because anyone with any length of time in this lifestyle will have some story. It may be very minor, but it probably exists. Sometime that a flogger rapped when you didn't mean it to, or what have you. But they said that the question that should be asked of a submissive is, when was the last time that you used your safe word? And that a submissive who says they haven't is lying or inexperienced. And I was like, I don't actually know that I agree with that. I don't use it. It doesn't even come up.
It means, to me anyway, that the dominant is more present of their submissive's state of mind and physical state than most, because it means that the dominant will stop long before you ever get to the point of needing a safe word. If your idea of a good session is that, and I'm going to use session rather than scene because scene sounds so many like we're playing, and we're not. But if your idea of a good session is to trigger your submissive to use the safe word, then you will never be in any situation where my girls are. That's not a thing.
I had, and I say had because it doesn't really come up very much anymore. When we first started, in this relationship, we did have the traditional, commonly used stoplight system, but in all of the time that we've been together, I have never used a safe word with him, simply because I only ever got close once or twice, and in both times, by the time I was thinking to myself that I was approaching the point where that would be necessary, he read my breathing, body language, what have you, and was like, okay, that's it, we're done. He knows way before I'm able to articulate it, way before I need to, and way before I'm even able to articulate that that's the point I'm at. He's like, no, you've had enough. And if he's not sure, if my body language or breathing has changed and he's unsure, he does check in. How are you doing? Are you okay? And because of that, the safe word has never been necessary. He knows my body better than I probably do, honestly. And so, if you find a 24/7 girl that says they've never, or boy for that matter, who says they've never used their safe word with their partner, ask them why. Because there's a decent possibility that the reason they've never used it is because they simply have a very attentive, and it doesn't make me a liar or inexperienced, that I have been fortunate that I have dealt with conscientious dominance. So that, and that does come up a lot. And when I find people who say I've never needed to use it, it's almost always in 24/7 type relationships because they've simply bonded to that point. So, that's. Now, our final one that came up in the thread was, and we touched on this earlier, that every CPE 24/7 is the same. And that's where I want to kind of close this, is it's not.
No.
It can't be. There are expectations that he has of me and ways that we do things at my house that would not work in yours.
No.
And vice versa.
And beyond that, when you were in my house, there were expectations I had of you that would not have worked for your sister. And there are expectations that I had of her that would not work for you. The expectations that I had of you do not work for your other half. Every relationship is different.
Munchkin and I talked about it when we were talking a little bit on the show about the fact that the way that she does things with her husband is a wonderful man, yes, and I adore him as a human being, I really do. And he is a good dominant partner for her. But despite the fact that they are 24/7 and we are 24/7, he would make a terrible dominant partner for me. And it goes in reverse. She adores my husband, and he is a wonderful dominant partner for me, but he would not be a good dominant partner for her, simply because her needs and his needs and my needs versus her husband's needs are such very different things. Their arrangement is working really well for them, but it doesn't work here. And that's the thing that I see come up. A lot of people always go, well, does it work this way in 24/7, or does it work that way in 24/7? And, or is this okay in a 24/7 dynamic? And the answer is always, it depends. Are you both consenting to it, and this is what you guys have negotiated and consented to in your home? Then sure, it's okay, go for it. But the answer, I can't give you an answer as to whether or not something is okay for your relationship because it isn't mine. And it just, it's a different thing. And every 24/7 household is going to look a little bit different. Just because we're all human beings, I promise. We're not, again, we're back to the not being bored like hive mind. And so we don't all do things exactly the same way. And so on that note, we'll leave this conversation there. I want to touch on something next week with you that it relates back to our discussion about health issues and how that works in these sorts of dynamics. And that, as I mentioned when we did that episode, was about inspired a little bit about by some of the posts I've seen over on Reddit, particularly about a woman there who was undergoing some surgery and struggling with how to balance that in a 24/7 dynamic. And she came back to report, which I'm happy to say, that his surgery has gone off well, and their adjustments in their dynamic have gone really, really well. And she's kind of coming to terms with it a little bit more. But it means that I want to have a discussion about, and this is where I want your perspective in particular, because we sometimes as submissives struggle with feeling like we are the ones being taken care of rather than taking care of our partner. Mm-hmm. And I kind of want to have a bit of a coffee table clutch about how that works from our end and how we can kind of adjust how we think to better accept that need, and how it feels and how you adjust the dominant side of things to that, because it is hard sometimes. Yeah, it certainly for us is to do. And so I want to kind of bring that out onto our little candid coffee table, and kind of put that out there to kind of talk to people a little bit about that. And so that's where I'm kind of leaning for next week, just because I've been mulling it over in my head quite a bit, and so I think it's a relevant topic that we'll get into next week. Did you have any other thoughts on this week's topic, or are we good?
I think we've covered as much as we can.
Yeah, unfortunately, I think any further thoughts just delve into, we're back to it depends. So we'll leave it there and tune in next week for our discussion on the topic of being cared for versus caring for as in these sorts of dynamics.
And in the meantime, stay safe out there.